The fluorescent lights in the executive suite flickered at 11:47 p.m., casting harsh shadows across the marble floor that Jerome Williams had just finished mopping for the third time that week. His knees ached, his back protested every movement, and the chemical smell of industrial cleaner had long since stopped registering in his nose. At 41, he looked older, the kind of tired that settles into a man's bones when he works 2 jobs to keep his daughter in a decent school, in clothes without holes, in a life that didn't advertise their poverty like a billboard. The janitorial uniform hung loose on his frame, dark blue with his name embroidered over the pocket and thread that was starting to fray. Nobody looked at janitors, not really. They were invisible infrastructure, background noise in buildings full of people making decisions that shaped the world while men like Jerome made. Sure, their trash disappeared and their floors gleamed. The CEO's office door was supposed to be locked at this hour. Jerome had explicit instructions never to clean the executive floor before midnight when everyone was guaranteed gone. But tonight, the door stood open, light spilling into the hallway, and he could hear someone inside moving with the frantic energy of desperation. He should have kept walking, should have come back later after whoever it was had left. But something made him pause at the doorway, mop still in hand, and peer inside. A woman stood behind the massive desk, her designer suit rumpled, her dark hair falling loose from what had probably been an elegant updo hours ago. She was surrounded by papers, computer screens, and what looked like the scattered remains of someone's entire career imploding in real time. Madison Cole, according to the nameplate on her desk. CEO of Cole Technologies, the company that employed 3,000 people in this building alone. The woman whose face appeared on magazine covers and business news segments with titles like "The Woman Who Revolutionized Cloud Computing" and "Tech's Rising Star." She looked up as Jerome's reflection appeared in the window behind her desk, and for a moment their eyes met in the glass. She turned and he saw the exhaustion there, the kind that went deeper than missed sleep. "I'm sorry," Jerome said immediately, stepping back. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I'll come back later." Madison raised a hand, stopping him. "Wait, you're Jerome, right? 3rd floor janitor?" He nodded, surprised she knew his name. Most executives didn't. "I have a problem," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "A big one. And I know this is completely inappropriate to ask, but can you fix computers?" Jerome blinked. "I'm not an IT, ma'am, I just clean." "I know what you do," Madison said, moving around the desk toward him. "But I've heard things. One of the day shift cleaning ladies, Rosa, she told me about how you fixed her son's laptop when he thought he'd lost his college thesis. Said you were some kind of genius with electronics, but you couldn't afford the certifications to work in the field." Jerome felt heat rise in his face. That had been a favor. Nothing official. "I know a little. Taught myself from library books and YouTube videos, but I'm not qualified." "I don't care about qualifications right now," Madison interrupted, and there was something almost manic in her eyes. "I care about results. My company is being hacked. Right now, as we speak, someone's trying to steal our proprietary code, 5 years of research and development, everything that makes us competitive. Our entire IT security team went home at 6. I called them back, but they won't get here for another 40 minutes. The breach is happening now, and I don't know how to stop it." She gestured at the screens behind her, and Jerome could see lines of code scrolling past, red warning, boxes flashing, firewalls being systematically dismantled by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "If they get our source code," Madison continued, her voice shaking, "we're done. Another company will have it in production in 6 months. We'll lose everything. 3,000 jobs, including yours, gone. I know it's insane to ask a janitor to fix this, but you're the only person in this building right now, and Rosa swore to me you understand this stuff. So I'm asking, can you fix this? Can you stop them? You have maybe 10 minutes before they break through the last firewall." Jerome looked at the screens, at the woman in front of him who was supposed to have all the answers but was asking him, at the mop still in his hand. Every instinct told him to back away, to say he couldn't help, to avoid responsibility for something this massive. If he tried and failed, he'd be the janitor who cost 3,000 people their jobs. If he tried and succeeded, he'd be the janitor who stepped outside his role, who got ideas above his station. But he thought about his daughter Kayla, 9 years old and asleep at Mrs. Patterson's apartment downstairs because he couldn't afford childcare. During his night shift, he thought about the job he needed to keep, the paycheck that bought groceries and kept the lights on. He thought about 3,000 other people who probably had kids and bills and lives that would shatter if this company went under. "Let me see," Jerome said, setting down the mop, down the EA. He moved to the desk, his janitor's uniform seeming absurd next to the leather executive chair. But Madison stepped aside without hesitation. Jerome's hands moved across the keyboard, and the muscle memory came back immediately. He'd been coding since he was 14, teaching himself in public libraries while other kids played sports. He'd been good enough to get into a decent college on scholarship until his girlfriend got pregnant senior year, and suddenly college wasn't an option anymore. The baby came, the girlfriend left, and Jerome found himself at 19 with a newborn and no degree, working whatever jobs he could find. But he'd never stopped learning, never stopped reading about systems and networks and security protocols in every spare moment. The hack was sophisticated, multi-layered, designed to look like routine maintenance traffic while systematically copying proprietary files to an external server. But whoever designed it had made assumptions about the security architecture, assumptions that were slightly outdated. Jerome's fingers flew across the keys, rerouting traffic, creating false data streams, isolating the breach vector. "I can't stop them." "Completely," he said, eyes never leaving the screen. "They're too far in, but I can feed them garbage data, make them think they're getting your code while actually giving them corrupted files. By the time they realize it's fake, your IT team will be here to close the real vulnerabilities." Madison watched over his shoulder, barely breathing. "How do you know how to do this?" "Same way I know how to fix anything," Jerome said, his hands never stopping. "You break it down to basics, figure out what's supposed to happen, find what's not happening, and fix the difference. Doesn't matter if it's a computer or a leaky pipe. Logic is logic." 7 minutes later, the breach attempt stalled. The scrolling red warnings turned yellow, then green. The attacker was still connected, but now they were downloading 47 gigabytes of code that looked legitimate but would corrupt the moment anyone tried to compile it. Jerome created a false confirmation message that would make them think the theft was successful, then severed the connection in a way that looked like natural network timeout. "Done," he said, leaning back. "They'll think they got it. By the time they figure out it's worthless, you'll have traced the connection and locked down the real vulnerabilities. You should call your IT team now. Tell them to focus on ports 8443 and 3389. That's where the weakness is." Madison stared at the screens, then at Jerome, then back at the screens. "You just saved my company," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "In 10 minutes, with no tools, no support, no access to our security protocols, you did what a team of 20 people couldn't do." Jerome stood up, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this whole situation was, how it would look if someone walked in and saw the janitor at the CEO's computer. "I should get back to work. You've got a mess to clean up and I've got floors to finish." "Wait," Madison said, grabbing his arm. We need to talk about this, about you. Your skills are wasted pushing a mop." Jerome gently pulled his arm free. "Ma'am, I appreciate that, but not qualified for anything else. No degree, no certifications, no resume that anyone in your HR department would look at twice. I'm a janitor, because that's the only job I could get that had benefits and let me work nights so I can be with my daughter during the day. It's not glamorous, but it pays, the rent." "That's insane," Madison said, and there was anger in her voice now. "You just demonstrated more problem-solving ability and technical knowledge than half my engineering team. You understand systems, security, code architecture, from library books and free online courses," Jerome interrupted. "Which doesn't mean anything in a world that requires credentials I can't afford. Look, I'm glad I could help, truly, but nothing changes here. Tomorrow I'll still be mopping floors, and you'll still be running this company, and that's how it should be. I'm not trying to be anyone's feel-good story about untapped potential. I'm just trying to keep my daughter fed and safe." He picked up his mop and walked toward the door. Behind him, Madison's voice stopped him one more time. "Jerome, what if I could change that? What if I could give you the credentials, the opportunity, the job you deserve?" Jerome turned back, and for the first time, she saw something in his face that looked like anger. With all due respect, ma'am, I've heard that before. People get inspired, make promises, then reality sets in. I'm a 41-year-old black man with a 9th-grade daughter and no degree. I'm a liability, a charity case, a PR nightmare waiting to happen. I've learned not to believe in fairy tales. This isn't a fairy tale, Madison said. This is business. You have skills my company needs. That's not charity. That's smart hiring. Jerome wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that 10 minutes of helping could actually change his life. Could give Kayla the father who wasn't always exhausted. Who could attend her school events without worrying about losing wages. But he'd lived long enough to know that want and reality rarely aligned. If you're serious, he said, quietly, call me tomorrow. I'm in the employee directory. But right now I need to finish my shift because I can't afford to lose this job over something that might not happen. He left before she could respond. Went back to mopping floors that would just get dirty again. Pushing the mop in long. Steady strokes that his body knew by heart. Behind him, in the office filled with screens showing the hack he'd stopped, Madison Cole stood alone and realized that the man who'd just saved her company was about to disappear back into invisibility because she lived in a world that measured worth by credentials instead of capability. The next morning, Jerome was 3 hours into his day shift at a construction site, cleaning portable toilets for a different company because one janitor job didn't pay enough, when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Williams? This is Madison Cole. I'd like to offer you a position as Senior Security Consultant for Cole Technologies. Starting salary $150,000 annually, full benefits, with the company paying for whatever certifications and education you want to pursue. I'm sending the formal offer to your email now. The only condition is that you start immediately, because frankly I don't trust my current security team to fix what you fixed in 10 minutes. Jerome sat down hard on a curb, construction noise and traffic roaring around him. The phone pressed to his ear like it might disappear if he loosened his grip. You're serious? Mr. Williams, in 10 minutes you saved 3,000 jobs and 5 years of research. That's worth more than any degree. So yes, I'm serious. The question is, are you willing to believe that sometimes fairy tales happen because someone finally sees what was there all along? Jerome thought about Kayla, about picking her up from school instead of Mrs. Patterson's apartment, about helping with homework instead of falling asleep exhausted. He thought about his mother, who'd raised him alone, who died believing her son would never escape the cycle of poverty, no matter how smart he was. He thought about all the nights he'd taught himself to code by library computer light, dreaming of a chance that never came. Until now. When do I start? Jerome asked, and Madison Cole smiled in her office 12 miles away, already drafting the email to HR that would make some people uncomfortable, that would raise questions about qualifications and proper hiring procedures, that would challenge everything the system believed about who deserved opportunities. Tomorrow, she said, wear whatever makes you comfortable. You've earned the right to define yourself. 2 years later, Jerome Williams was lead architect on Cole Technologies' revolutionary new security platform, one that would become industry standard within 5 years. He had certifications, a degree completed through the company's executive education program, and a team of 20 engineers who called him boss, without a trace of irony. Kayla was 11, thriving in a private school, proud to tell anyone who'd listened that her dad was a genius who'd started as a janitor and proved that talent doesn't care about credentials. And on the wall of his office, framed and mounted where he could see it every day, was his old employee badge with janitorial services printed under his name, not because he was ashamed of where he'd come from, but because he never wanted to forget that for every person who gets a chance, 100 more are still mopping floors with genius in their hands, and no one asking what they can really do. Madison Cole learned something too. She created a program identifying employees in entry-level positions who demonstrated exceptional skills, offering them education and opportunity regardless of their background. They called it the Williams Initiative, and it became the most successful talent development program in the tech industry. Because sometimes the answer to impossible problems isn't hiring more experts. It's asking the janitor if he can fix computers, and actually listening when he says yes. Jerome's answer that night hadn't just left Madison speechless, it had changed everything. Not because he fixed her problem, but because he'd shown her that genius doesn't announce itself with credentials in corner offices. Sometimes it arrives at 11:47 p.m. carrying a mop, asking if you really want help, or just want to feel good about asking. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you choose to see what was invisible all along.